No, I'm just listening to songs. Yeah, yeah.
I'm Neena Naishad, founder director of Neekoee Foundation. I'm so excited and thrilled to welcome you all to Neekoee Foundation's first Artist Grant Award evening. This is a very special day for us. The idea of Neekoee's Artist Grant has finally taken shape after a lot of brainstorming and efforts put in by our advisory panel. It's a dream come true. Today with us, we have our jury members, Zulekha Chaudhary, theatre director and lighting designer, director Alkazi Theatre Archives, Alkazi Foundation, and Anupam Singh, artist and founder, Council for Arts and Social Practice. Members of our advisory panel, Professor Pankaj Chandra, Vice Chancellor, Ahmedabad University, Sharmila Samant, artist, faculty art design and performance, Shivnada University, and Amitesh Grover, performance-based artist and curator, faculty, National School of Drama. I welcome you all and deeply appreciate your valuable time and involvement through the process of the grant initiative. We are a very young and nascent foundation, learning our way to this wonderful creative space of visual and performing arts. We started with bringing cutting-edge performances and art exhibitions to our city. As I always felt, Ahmedabad was never on the artist's radar. We at Neekoee have welcomed numerous performances, visual art exhibitions, theatre festivals for children, talks and interactions, and art installations, engaging the young mind and the city at large. Art as a medium of change is an important aspect in a society and is underutilized in our country. Excuse me, can I please ask everybody to unmute themselves? Mute themselves. Thank you. Art as a medium of change is an important aspect in a society and is underutilized in our country. We truly believe that debates, discussions, and exchange of thoughts stimulate our minds and make us think of the world in a different perspective. The humble efforts are towards a more responsible thinking society, more inclusive and humane. These grants were a result of the crisis that our world went into at the onset of the pandemic. In times of fear, isolation, and uncertainty, we ourselves were grappling with various questions, like what the future of art practice would be, what would be the different mediums and ways of dissemination, how will we adapt to the new normal, will this lead to collaboration and solidarity amongst different disciplines and communities? Who best but you, young artist community, to think and answer these questions? Thus, we floated two motivational grants. Everyone accepted it with open arms. We are touched with the faith that you have reposed in the foundation. Applications have poured in from nook and corner of the country, an overwhelming response of 300 plus applications. All of you have contributed with enthusiasm, creativity, positivity to bring a change through art, and we had to choose just two, a daunting task for our jury members. To be fair to this response, with great joy, I'm delighted to announce one additional grant of rupees 1 lakh over and above the two grants, which are at 1.5 lakhs each. All three grantees will be mentored by Sharmila Samant and Amitesh Grover. With the faith and support of all the art lovers, we intend having these grants year on year so that we can inspire ambitious artists to engage the community through art and bring change in our society and establish themselves globally, inshallah. Many people and experiences have helped shape the foundation where it is today and have encouraged me to embark on my dreams. I'm thankful to each one of them. Grateful to AIA Engineering Limited, our pillar of support, for the strong commitment and being with us right from inception. KHS Machinery Private Limited, friends and our well-wishers, without whom this initiative and grant would not have taken shape. Thank you everyone for being here today with us to make this evening more special and memorable. Do like our social media handles so that you all are abreast with our initiatives. We will be taking the questions, so please feel free to post them in the chat box after the panel discussion starts. We will be posting a detailed profile of each panelist on the chat box, so after that gets over, you can post your questions. I now invite Professor Pankaj Chandra to lead the conversation with the jury and the mentors on today's topic, and then announce the awards. Thank you. Over to you, Pankaj.
Thank you very much, Nina, and welcome everyone to this wonderful evening. This is an evening of hope, and I think that's how we ought to see these precedented challenges that are thrown before us. Before I really get to the issues of the grant and the issues that you raised, Nina, about the solidarity between the community, mentorship, and many others, I just can't resist with the 5 wonderful and globally connected panelists that we have here. Amitesh, Sharmila, Zulekha, and Anupam. I just can't resist asking them a little bit bigger question for these times that we are facing. So my first thought that is running in my mind, this is after a very long time, the first crisis where the entire world is struggling. If you look at the crisis of the pandemic of 1918, or the 2 world wars, or the oil crisis of the 70s, those of us who were around there at that time, or even the financial crisis of 97 or 2008, they were always localized in some parts of the world. And there were some other parts that remain unaffected, and people in those unaffected parts actually lifted the rest of the world, both socially, economically, and the world kind of came back together. After a long time, we're seeing that almost everybody in every part of the world is struggling through this pandemic. So it appears that there is a very new global. And I have my question, maybe Sharmila, you could tell us a little bit, what do you think is the new global that you may see for the creative arts, given these challenges at this time? Sharmila. Sharmila.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Pankaj, and thank you all of you for actually joining us, and to all the 324 people who actually gave us time and wrote back to us, which was a wonderful sort of experience for all of us. In these times, it seems as if, I feel that globally we have connected much better as artists than we have with our immediate neighbors. And what do we make as art in times when that you can't even step outside. And I think there have been a number of these attempts by a lot of people around the world of trying to connect socially. That is why I feel that social distancing was such a wrong and a regrettable choice of words to sort of begin the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic itself. Because social distancing implies distancing between between people, between communities. Whereas we should have called it physical distancing, which of course WHO has now brought in. But I mean, in India especially, social distancing has become such a such a way of restating what we already had as our caste and gender differences and distancing, which is already there within the Indian society. And talking globally about artists coming together and or people coming together and trying to actually provide support or give a kind of wellness to each other, which would have been the role of art, which is the role of art. And I think there are a number of initiatives all around which are actually doing just that. I find it so much more easing for me when I can talk to people around the world and we all are in our little cocoons, which are very small and very local. So in fact, art has become that connecting kind of process of meeting within this social distancing.
Okay. You know, I was also intrigued when I saw Anupam sitting in Portland with so much happening there, in addition to the pandemic. Do you want to reflect for us a little bit on its implication on arts and how artists might be responding to these two big challenges that your neighborhood is experiencing?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, it's especially whatever is going on in Portland and in some parts of United States. You know, in one hand, people are coming together in solidarity and protesting, and there has been huge kind of restrictions imposed on, all the protesters and people around here. That includes violence from the authority. That's sad, but it has been a complex time for most of us because one way, lots of artists have lost their ways of surviving, so it became complex for them. Then when the minimum resources they had, they lost that, and how would they make their art and address those issues while they're addressing something bigger, in the society. However, there has been a lot of small initiatives to support the artists, and then the artists are also getting, ingrained in their own context, which is why I think this pandemic also did something, which is to ground ourselves locally, while we are broadly connected internationally. So yeah, it has been a very, I would say, vast experience in all aspects. There has been a lot of micro grants for artists to work, and some of the artists are working in socially engaged way for a long time. And so supports from some of the government organizations and some of the funding bodies are coming up, even if it is in a very micro level, very small amount of grants they're getting. but at least they are being able to continue their practices, which is, I think, a great effort from those organizations. And at the same time, artists are also kind of taking out the issues that are very relevant and important at this moment of time, which includes what Shamila was talking about, social distancing. And it's ironic that it is not only in India, it is almost in every part of the world that is there. Maybe somewhere it is caste, somewhere it is race, but it is very much relevant in global context. Yeah.
Thanks, Anupam. Amitesh, I know you were one of the original set of initiators that envisioned this grant and the initial conversation that you had with Neena and Sharmila. What when you were, which led to this kind of an idea to come to Neena about it?
Firstly, thank you, Neekoee Foundation, for giving all of us this opportunity, this platform to come together and to think in this moment. And hello to everybody, including my co-panelists and everybody else who's joined. It's great to see all of you, even if 3/4 of the video and audios are shut. I know you're there. And this is a strange sense of togetherness that we are increasingly getting used to. Of believing that we are all together, even though we can't see each other and hear each other. I'm really happy, Pankaj, that you started with the word crisis, because it is an overused word in this time. But also, I think what is helpful for us is to remember the Greek root of this word, which means a turning point. And so I think we need to keep reminding ourselves that we are in a historic moment, but this is only a turning point. We're not at the end of something. And I think there are lessons from the past that we can learn and also sort of affect this turning point in some way. One of the things that I have been personally thinking about a lot more is that today we are experiencing different forms of proximity. That in the absence of physical assembly, in the absence of actually being there in person and meeting each other, there are new and different forms of proximities and togetherness that are emerging. And I think that this is a great moment to register that. While thinking about this grant with Neena, and Neena had some wonderful ideas about how to initiate this support, I think for us, there were 3 questions that were quite important. The first one being that, that because we're in the middle of a crisis, I think we have to rethink our relationship with the world. And by that, I also mean, in terms of artists, the relationship that we have with the world in terms of our artistic practice. And how does one pivot back to this moment of, thinking about artistic practice, to take a step back, to not so much think about producing and creating as to think about the processes that actually have been going into making art practice. And this is, I think, an interesting moment for even young practitioners. And I know it's really hard. Many of us have lost our conventional ways of making and creating art, like Anupam mentioned. But I think this is also a moment to step back and to be reflective about our artistic practices. And it is for that reason that this grant was not based on the idea of discipline or form. We discussed a lot in the beginning about whether these grants should be visual art grants or theater grants or performance grants, and we decided to go against the grain of looking at art in terms of disciplines and thinking of and opening this moment out to different kinds of proposals and provocations that could become art or artistic practice in the near future. The second one was to how to engage with this moment, not in terms of the immediate grief and trauma that all of us are experiencing, but also to keep the critical force of art alive, and how to keep registering these times in different registers in different ways through artistic practice. And the third, which I think was the most important one guiding this, was how to share resources. While everybody experiences the loss of access to space, access to distribution mechanisms of art, access to theater halls. Theaters were the very first venues that were shut down across the world. How does one think of redistributing and creating different ways of sharing resources in this time? And so these were the guiding factors behind this grant. And I hope that Nina and Sharmila and others can sort of add to this.
No, Sharmila, before I go to Sulekha, I have a specific question for her, but do you want to add something to what Amitesh said, Sharmila?
Yes, I mean, one of the other things which we were looking at is a kind of practice which is not usually, I mean, there are a lot of grants in India now, and not that there are enough, but there are a lot. But when we were thinking of this particular grant, we were thinking of a kind of practice which is not usually favored, which is not mainstream. It was something where artists could experiment, and we were also looking at artists who were looking at social practice, and then precisely how do you define the social in times of social distancing. And I mean, so we were looking at different words like social solidarity instead of social distancing. And that is the reason why we thought of this grant. And how do people come together in spite of state sanctioned distancing, which we are all practicing?
Okay. Absolutely. I'm going to pick up from something that you just said. And one of the big casualties of this time has been trust. And not for any other reason, but just, it's just the virus that has made us less trusting. You don't know if the person ahead of you in the queue or behind you, or even one of your family members would give you one. And I think it's a state of mind which is very, at one end, very troubling. And I want this, I have a question for Sulekha. How do you think art can help us build this solidarity to bring the trust back into the community in times to come? Because it's a very big challenge. I think the virus may go away, but I don't know when will the trust be back.
Thank you, Pankaj, and I'd like to thank Nina and Neekoee Foundation for your invitation to be on the jury for this grant. And congratulations to you and to the grantees. I think if I can just actually quite briefly answer your question, I think it occurred to me at the, when we went into lockdown, that actually I feel that particularly in Delhi, and I can only speak from Delhi, I feel we've been in an exceptional moment sometime from last year, with everything that's happening in Delhi. And so in a way, I felt when we went into lockdown that it just further underlined sort of what I've been calling an exceptional moment. It's exceptional circumstances that one is in, and it's just sort of become larger and underlined larger, I think, connectivities in how we connect to people, outside of Delhi, outside of the country even. and it's become a moment. So the exceptional moment is always interesting to me, because what is possible in that exceptional moment is also very unpleasant things, as we've seen already unfolding around us. Suddenly, what was not necessarily so easily possible has become very easily possible, given the COVID situation. Um, and so, I mean, I sort of have two or three questions that I'd just like to propose. And I think these are important questions for me in general, given that we are living in exceptional times. Um, One is, and this moment, I think for my first question, this moment is sort of, there's always this question of a what before coronavirus, and what will happen after. And I think this moment is important to think about whether we want the same kind of world that existed before. And in any case, it's going to change, but in what way we'd like it to change, and what is the part that each of us in a very small way can do towards that. I've just been thinking about that in my personal context. I mean, I wouldn't even kind of, it's a very large question, but I was just trying to think, how can one do that just for oneself? What does this moment mean to each one of us, and what does it mean going forward to me personally? And I think it's an important question, actually, because it begins to, your own biases begin to get uncovered. Let me put it like that. I'm referring to also something you mentioned. And at one level, I feel it's a very personal thing one has to engage with. I have generally two other questions that I guess I feel are important in the context of, I would say, art or theater. I mean, I would say theater, but of course it can be put to art, I guess. So the question for me is, can art or theater engage in sort of social and political issues without compromising either art or politics? And what I think the more important question, particularly in the context of this grant, is what kind of knowledge can art or theater generate that activism and theory alone cannot do? Because I think, I mean, if to fold it back into what, the grant proposes, what it's talking about, art as social practice. One can easily just say social practice, but when one does talk about art, I think the question, as I said, and I'll leave it at that, is what is produced, what kind of knowledge, what more can be produced, what kind of uncoverings and sensitivities, perhaps, can art propose, or can art uncover, uh, which is a specific thing, and I'll leave it at that.
So thanks. I think you actually put a couple of very, very important questions. Your first one of what kind of a world do we need, the same kind of world that we had before? I think that's a very, very powerful question. And even the second one, what kind of knowledge that art can generate, which activism, politics, and art would not. So I think many of you are also art educators. And I really like a word from all four of you in terms of how do you see art education change with this experience and the questions that Suleika, you can answer from the context of the questions that you raised, but how do you think art education is going to change now? Will it change at all?
Well, I don't know. One can certainly, I mean, I think the model to have mentors and mentors from different disciplines perhaps is, I think, an indicator, because I think it hasn't been possible for some time. I don't think you can just function from anymore, really, from, if you're an artist, that all you do is art. Yes, I think that is, of course, very important. But I think what is equally important is thinking laterally. So I think the social sciences are extremely important. Personally, I think anthropology, political science, economics, I think all architecture, all these are very important things you have to feed. Uh, you have to you have to feed your work with. You can't separate it anymore. So, in as much as you need to know the history of your practice, and um, sort of skill and technique, which I also think is extremely important, to be extremely skillful. I think it's very important to be able to think across disciplines and see how you can make that translation back into a particular artistic form. In this case, I think that's really very critical, as far as I can see. And I think it's very important to understand that one has to know that one's life in any situation, but as an artist, I'll speak from that point of view, continuously educating yourself. That's an extremely, extremely important discipline to have for yourself, I think.
You're really speaking the minds of large number of educationists at this time. We're talking about reinventing this whole world of liberal education. Anupam, you do art education. What's your feel on this one now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Zuleika. Definitely, you brought up some important aspects of both social practice and art in general. Um, I think what the current art education, if I may say so, is proposing to do is what you just said. It is looking across discipline, because every discipline has its own advantage and set of knowledge, but also it has a set of drawbacks and limitations. So what in a way social practice, what I think is proposing is looking beyond those limitations and how can we bring those disciplines together, and create a new set of knowledge that looks at possibility rather than just looking at set of knowledge, which is already given. And just to reflect back on the question you raised about, what kind of world do we want and what kind of world we were looking at uh, pre-coronavirus or COVID. I think there is also a question: were we settled with the world that we were in, or we were still questioning and we were still looking for the new? So that's my question, and I think many of us has been looking for how to challenge, how to counter the already status quo, and then bring in some new direction and problematize and the, create some critical set of knowledge, which is also part of social practice. You can say that it includes more voices, more ideas, more perspective, and brings more possibility into it. So, and sometimes a single discipline might have a certain limitation in terms of accessibility, which if I say, let's say, talk about activism, but if you add an aesthetics to it, it makes things little accessible for me. That's what I feel. Like there are a couple of organizations who are purely working within the framework of art and activism. They create digital platform, free accessible, like there's an organization in Seattle called Amplifier. So they work across artists from different part of the world, and they create free resources for people to access, and that gets used everywhere throughout the world. And that's another kind of newness, like how you look at this new globalized situation, which is very much steeped into the local, So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Sure, sure. Sharmila, your thought, and then Amitesh, I'll ask all of you are educators. So I'd love to hear a little bit on where is education going to go. And
I would like to sort of, thank Zuleka for bringing up the idea of mentoring. And as art educator today, I feel one of the most important role that I can play for my students is to be that mentor. And a kind of I mean, when I talk of mentoring, I'm talking about the 3 C's of mentoring, which is care, counseling, cheerleader sometimes, or a consultant. So, it's not as if we can currently talk of art just in terms of skills or even knowledge, but it is about how do we provide the willingness to share with our students. And I mean, that becomes such an important transition for students who have even sometimes left us, who have passed out, but they need that hand holding currently because of the times that we are in. I mean, the 159 days that today is after the 24th of March, I feel that more than teaching what a curriculum requires me to teach, or the kind of courses that I'm doing, I find that as an educator, as a pedagogue, I am hand holding for people to just come into that space where they can relook and recreate. Because
okay.
I mean, we have not thought of the mental implications of solitude. It's really a difficult time for most students, and it is precisely that which one needs to first, as educators, get these students out of.
Sure. Amitesh, your quick thought on this?
I'm wondering if there can be a quick thought on this, because for the last 3 months, as art educators, and we've been taking online classes and been involved in this sort of a sudden move from physical space to digital space.
Should I say circus?
It's a kind of a circus which has sometimes more chaos than choreography. But I think there are sort of lessons that we're learning. The first sort of lesson that we're learning is that I don't think our art institutions were as fluid, flexible, and as ready to adapt to a crisis as they seemed before. There is an obstinacy in our institutional structures, and they are becoming quite. It's really challenging to confront them, to encounter them, and to see if they can be made more flexible. The second, of course, is the curriculum. Many of us have been struggling with a curriculum that does not talk to the contemporary world. And so the question that many of us have been asking is that, what are we preparing students for? What are we preparing the students of art for? What is the kind of world that we as art educators can see, but they as students cannot see right now, when we are ourselves operating in the blind? And that is a conundrum that is very, very hard to be honest about, also, personally. And I think what this moment has also done is that it has brought to the surface several social inequities that were nonetheless present before this moment, but somehow were not foregrounded. And I think this moment has sort of foregrounded many of the inequities of learning, of the kind of spaces that young artists and young students of art come from. And it has become quite, it has become very necessary to address them as we go on right now. So I think that these are the kind of challenges that we as art educators are facing. But at the end, I think this is something I remember, that the digital space, like the physical space, is also a social space. It's also a cultural space. And I think it is time that all of us who are engaged in this moment understand that the digital is also a public space, and that that can also be claimed, interrupted, disrupted, reclaimed by artistic practice, by learning and talking about art. And I think that is something that will be, for me personally, something that I will be thinking about and acting upon in weeks to come.
No, I think your last comment is indeed very valuable. Though I must underline that for once, I'm a student of management and technology. For me, for once, it also showed that the cheerleaders of the technology, which said that that will bridge the divide in the society and create it more equitable, also hopefully we'll be seeing that it does not do that so easily, at least at this point of time. I'm going to leave the last word to Neena, to maybe you want to express your feeling on when you decided to agree to this grant. What made you do that? Or what convinced you?
No, in fact, I mean, till now we were all, I mean, we were more into physical spaces and doing performances and inviting artists to do the talk. So in fact, actually, I was not sure what are we going to do now. And but then I thought that in this time there has to be some hand-holding, some kind of hand-holding where the mentors also take the young artists through the process of the project. And I think that was one thought, that maybe this is the time to give. I mean, it's more of giving. The time is of giving right now. And so these are the kind of thoughts that I had in mind, and we did a discussion and slowly it emerged. I mean, we did, as you also know, we did a lot of brainstorming on what exactly to do. But and there is very little support in the society for this sphere, as well as from the government, and that we could see in the kind of applications that we got. I mean, it was overwhelming to see such a great response. So, but it's, I think the thought of giving, I think, was the most this thing where, I mean, this is the time when I've thought that, I mean, what does a person need? Our needs are so less, and we try and get more and more things. It is more of giving that is, I think, has come to my mind for this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Well, maybe we should, all good things have to come to a little bit of an end.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Zulekha, Sharmila, Anupam, and Amitesh. Wonderful comments, and I'm going to take back a few and reflect on them. Thank you. Back to you, Neena.
Okay, so I think we do what everybody is awaiting right now. So you do the honors of announcing the grantees. And maybe all of us can't clap, but maybe do reactions and put a reaction on it. This is the digital world that we are in. So
we'll clap.
We'll clap. We'll put our reactions on screen. And then after that, the jury will take over, I think.
Yeah. So thank you. You know, this is a proud privilege to be able to be given the opportunity to announce the three wonderful artists who are being awarded this grant tonight, and I'm happy to announce them. The three are, first, Ajmal Shifaz. The project was Echo of Nothing. Ajmal is a BFA, Government College of Fine Arts in Thrissur, Kerala, and is a master in visual art, Shivnadar University. So let's kind of give a big hand to Ajmal. Ajmal, are you there? So maybe you can kind of, there you go. All right, right in the middle. So congratulations. The next grantee is Dhwani Vij. The project was Of What Remains Explores the Latent Potential of Objects. Dhwani has a bachelor's in English from Kirorimal College in Delhi University and a master in theatre from Royal Holloway College, University of London. Congratulations to Dhwani. Dhwani, are you there in the screen? Maybe raise your hand somewhere. Yeah, okay. Our third grantee this evening is Sumantra Sardar from West Bengal. His project was Toxic Fashion, a journalistic intervention into the ecological transformation from an accustomed practice of the people of Nahazari, Mahisgod area. Pardon me for not pronouncing it correctly, but so Sumantra has a BFA in painting from Kala Bhavan, Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan, of course. Should be expecting that. An MFA in painting from SN School of Arts and Communication, University of Hyderabad. Congratulations, Sumantra, Dhwani, and Ajmal. So let's kind of a big hand to all of them. Okay. Now I'm handing it back to the jury to take it from here.
Anupam, would you like to go first?
Okay. Okay, you can also go, no problem.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, I must say, and also thank you again, Nina, for putting, and all of the members here, putting this together and inviting me to be part of it. It's a commendable job from your side. Definitely, Ajmal's, it was really challenging, to be honest, to select few from such amazing projects that we have gone through. And Ajmal's project stood out for me in a sense, like when we are talking about social distancing, and there is also a kind of a danger of, erasing certain narratives from the history or the memory of the nation. And sometimes I feel like the COVID can be a wonderful opportunity for many of the people, to forget about the incidents that we have gone through. And also because of the social distancing, certain people or communities who have gone through a loss or trauma or anything, it is important to be with people, be with them, at this moment, and feel that sense of belonging, that sense of equity. So Ajmal's project, stood out for many reasons for me. One, its critical perspective on engaging with the aesthetic of violence, that was really appealing in many ways for me. And also the subject matter, there is a kind of an immediacy and an urgency, as I said, that often things get forgotten in the nation's memory. And this is a way to, could possibly be looking at. Is there anyone? Should I go on? Okay. So, so I think letting it be alive in the memory, but in a critical way, that creates more perspective to look at certain things and maybe bring in our opinions and feedbacks to that was one reason also that I selected that project. The third thing is, as I said, that engaging what I have looked through Ajmal's proposal and work, he's been working with the community, and the project seems immersive. It's very much grounded in the community lives, and this is an extension. So he probably will get more opportunities to bring more narrative through, the processes like workshops and creating the sculptures and all that stuff he talked about. And third, and in that way, you're also bringing up the question of agency, how much voices you're being able to bring in together, how many perspectives you're bringing together. And allowing kids from, and he's looking in a very interesting way to create his project, which is a sonic or sound sculpture, I guess. Um, he's working with kids, he's working with welder, he's working with members from the community. Um, that's, I think, in many ways tells the aspect of agency and how inclusive a project could be. And also, um, when he talks about taking the work through the city, it's a complex process that he's creating. It's not that it's going to create just one kind of perspective. It will have multiple perspective, and how he incorporates those perspectives and views into the work or in some other format of documentation is something that I'm very interested to look at. So yeah, I mean, overall, it came to me as a well-grounded project proposal, and I'm hoping with mentorship from Sharmila and Amitesh, the project will be more enriched and potentially bring more complex results than what is just put up there. Thank you, Pankaj.
I would just like to say about the proposals that, in general, the proposals were, I think, interesting to me for two reasons. One is that all of them more or less step outside the gallery and the theater. And I thought it was interesting and, of course, extremely timely, because I don't think at this particular moment there is any other option, except any other possibility than to make art itself a public space. The other thing that struck me was a general willingness to take risks. Um, and I think this is also something extremely important to think about in smaller and larger ways. So the proposals in general, for me, uh, you know, indicated a willingness to take risks, not only in terms of practice, but risks in terms of questioning the status quo in general and across. Everybody had different things they were engaging with. So this willingness and desire to kind of question systems and structures, I think, is extremely critical at this point. And that, I would say, is my response in general to the proposals we looked at. I'd like to respond to Dhwani's work. And Neena, if it's okay with you, could we ask Dhwani to very briefly describe her proposal?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. Let Dhwani talk about the proposal and then you may talk. And I think Anupam, for Sumantra also, can we do the same way? I think because the audience also will come to know what the project is. So,
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that format is possible.
Sorry.
Maybe we can ask Ajmal
it's
also.
The time difference, I think. So that's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Zulekha.
So Dhwani, if wherever you are, if you could, congratulations, and please, it would be wonderful if you could just briefly describe your project.
Hi, thank you. I'm just finding it really hard to breathe. So I might fumble a little.
So, I mean, just a short description, so that when I respond to it, it would be good for everybody to have a context.
Right. So our project places objects at the center of it. We are looking at objects in two ways in our project. We are looking at it in a performative space, and we are also looking at objects as things that hold experiences, stories, narratives within themselves. We will be using Brecht's Fear and Misery as our starting point for the performative exploration. And the play is about the how are social structures and relationships collapsing under the wake of a fascist regime. And we intend to perform it using object theater as our primary form. We then wish to open up the space and turn it into a museum-like space where not only objects from the performance, but objects taken from people's lives and stories of staying in this country right now here are taken from people's lives and kind of put together for the spectator to engage with.
Okay, thank you. So I have sort of three things that I'd like to highlight that interested me about your project, and I feel that they will definitely be interesting for you to work through, and I think interesting for us to see what through, and I'm sure through your process of mentoring, you will develop a whole bunch of other questions, certainly more than the ones that have occurred to me. So one of the things that interested me was part of your work is with actors, and part of your work is actually directly with the audience. And what this entails in terms of process is quite different. Particularly in your engagement with an audience, how, the framing of questions is interesting and strategic for you to elicit the complexity that you as a maker are looking for, right? The other thing that was of interest to me, which is, I mean, is not so different. I mean, the process of working with the text that is from another time and of another history, how do you kind of work with that in this context today? So how does one engage with the process of, you could call it adaptation as departure, as interruption, and there are many other ways, I guess, you can deal with that process of adaptation. Whether you choose to leave the text, the original text, as a scaffolding and a structure and make something new, or what you choose to retain and why. The other thing that I thought was really also pretty timely is that your project proposes a museum, right? And the idea of the museum comes with its own histories and debates, and there are currently a huge lot of debates. And I think it would be interesting interesting for you to do that kind of a research and see, and do the translation into the work, right? How do you bring current debates, discourse, which you choose, which you don't, which are your focus and which not. But I think the interesting thing there is that museums are about building believable narratives, right? And actually, this is also what theater is exactly about. And so these were a few things that I responded to about your project, with your project. So good luck.
Nina, before I get into Sumantro's project, I also think, thank you, Zulekha, for putting that up, and it's wonderful what you did. Can we also let Azmul to describe his project so that people also get a little bit of context what I was talking about? Yeah, thank you. Is Azmul there?
Yes, he's there.
Okay. Ajmal, can you also briefly talk about your project?
Audible?
It's a little choppy, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm so glad to everyone. Like, I'm so happy to hear this. Yeah. So when I thought of this project, like it was in such a situation where like we faced lots of issues in this corona situation also, like working with the people who are affected by lots of issues, like as you all know. So so we thought that like how to work with them, like with the kids, and like how to manage in this situation with, with basically focusing on this public art, and like how we can, how to like how to penetrate this in such a situation, and like how to work with these kids and like the other people who are affected from those areas. And so yeah, like that only, like we, like I started this thought, and like then slowly generated with this previous project which I was doing with some kids from Dadri. So we were doing some toys and other things and all from that space. So this all strike me to develop a new skills, like, which I found in and like because of my engagement inside the protest areas and other places. And so yeah, that's how it generated like this project. I don't know what to say more about this project because I'm so excited right now. I can't release it also, but yeah, I think I might do that like later on. I don't know, but like yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because you just talked about you're interested in public art because conventionally, or in status quo, public art it meant something else, previously, where it could be a public sculpture or some kind of a monument or something like that. But in this context, the public is part of the art, so they are the co-producer or co-author of the aesthetic production, and also the question of production and distribution is very important. And what's more important in your work, what I felt is like how you're bringing this idea of play, game, and violence to play against each other in a very complex way. So that was really commendable. Thank you. Okay, so our third grantee is Shumantro Shordar. I don't know if he's there. Shumantro,
Yes,
I'll
he's there.
take the same format. Maybe you can explain a little bit about your project, and then we can talk about,
sure.
yeah, right.
Well, first of all, thank you, sir, everyone, for selecting me as a grant for the grantee. I was actually, this project started long before this corona crisis happened, and I was actually I shifted. I was working in Hyderabad, and then I shifted to my native place to stay with my family. And then when I was in the first few months when I was walking around in these places, and then I found first there was a very great feel to work with the students, especially because I was working in the school in there. So first I joined in a school in here, talking to the teachers and all. Then when I was moving around around my childhood places, I found the jeans factories, like what was there in the like this like it was there for a long time, like before my birth it was there, and these factories were at play. So when I was moving through that area, I found that the canal which is like connecting to the Ganga, that is completely blue in that area. So it moved me, and I went to that area, and I found that this if I could work with this community, and in that way it generated. And then I found that the cloth pieces which generated from that, it's a tons of it which is burnt away in that area to like sustain for the people who is working in that in those jeans factories. So and before that some sort of personal development changes happened in me, and which which almost like connected me with these happenings in my area after coming back after a long time. So immediately I joined. I started documenting every possible way, and I started communicating with the with the schools and students so that I can get to them at least to the more I was more focused to this to connect to the students. That's why, and which for which I thought that it will be impossible to connect to the elders without connecting to their kids and without connecting the schools and all. So, and then I started going around those places and collecting all those things, and I started making in the its very initial stage, and after the lockdown, really I got stuck in between because that area is completely contaminated at present time. So, but slowly I'm working with this materials which I collected from them, and I'm starting to teaching around with these things. And like from my traditional ways of doing things, I completely moved on something different things, which came according to the situation at present. So this is the thing I'm working. I don't know. I am really I can explain very well or not at this time. I'm really overwhelmed by this by the nomination getting the nomination from the team. So thank you. This is all from me.
Yeah. So I liked, maybe Dhoni also, you can add later on. So what I liked about your ongoing engagement with the community and how you're looking across discipline, like you talked about in your project working with doctors, ecologists, craft
Right.
makers, and chemists and designers. So I like this interdisciplinary nature of your practice that you're trying to put in together, and also the most important aspect is like how you're involving the kids in the community, to investigate their own living situation,
Right.
so there is a sense of inclusiveness, and also maybe possibly, I don't know, when they investigate the situation by themselves, it's also not questioning, but at the same time maybe possibly looking for some answers by themselves. And
Right.
you're working as a facilitator or as a catalyst to create generous dialogue. So I like this format of dialogic engagement with the community. Um, at the same time, you talked about certain crafts, like using the craft materials to create some alternative outcome, which is the
Right.
pouches and bags that you've created. I felt like that could possibly contribute to their economic situation if they are
Right.
able to produce something which is not just environmentally damaging or health-wise it's very unhygienic, but also taking the solution to add on to the existing situation, whether it's economic or health. So that was something nice about your project, I think. Maybe Vani, you want to add, Zulekha, maybe you want to add something?
I think uh, you've spoken about the key thing for me, which was that it moves across disciplines, and I think that that's really a very important and critical thing.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So I think that with that, it's over to
Yeah.
me now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think congratulations to all three grantees. We'll be getting in touch with you over the mail. Thank you so much for participating in this. Thank you everyone who has put in their applications. I'm sorry, but we had to choose only 3 out of the so many that they came. But keep the practice on and don't get disheartened. Kalyani, do we have questions? Kalyani? Just a second. So if there are any question answers, we are a little above our time frame that we had decided. I thought dinner time would really get in way. Kalyani?
Radhi Parikh Parik, in the chat box is asked whether it's possible to see the images of the artist's work or visualization of the proposal. That is the only question that we have.
Oh, okay. I think images, I mean, the work is yet to be done. So there are no images as of now, Radhi. And I think the visualization is said in the, what the grantees said in the process and what the thought about the project. This is a project which we will take through the 6 to 9 months. And then maybe after 6 or 9 months, we meet again, Radhi, to see the visualization of the project. That's how it's going to work. So I think there are no other questions, and Kalyani will take over and do the.
I would just like to say one last thing, that
yeah.
I think this is a fantastic Arts Grant, Neena, and I hope that this is the first year of many more years to come, where this Arts Grant will be continued and will sustain so many young art practices. Many of you who applied this year did not get through. I'm being very honest. Actually, there were about 24 proposals. Actually 36 proposals, which had finally made the shortlist, from which the final 3 got selected, and each one of them was very interesting. And I hope that many of you are able to apply with maybe a slightly different proposal, because the context will change next year, but do apply again to this grant, because sometimes it's really a matter of very slight difference between ideas, and yeah, looking forward to a long future of this arts grant and a community of young artists that we can build over time.
Amitesh, do you want to say what we had in mind to talk about the way the grants are put forward? I mean, just a fleeting this thing, and then maybe Kalyani takes over, or maybe
I think there's enough said. I think it'll be
about the where you would invite people. We would invite people to just talk about how to write the proposal and the grants.
Maybe Sharmila, maybe you can.
And then I think after that, Kalyani takes over and we close.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
No, actually, while reading the grants, we thought that it might be a good exercise, if you are all interested, into having little workshops about grant writing itself. Because while we got some fantastic grants, about 34 of them were shortlisted, there were a whole lot of people who actually didn't know how to write a grant. And we thought that, as Pankaj said, most of us are are educators and pedagogues, and we thought that maybe that is something that has never been discussed in your BFAs and MFAs, and so, or in your performance studies. So maybe we could, if you all are interested, maybe you could write to us, and if there is a large enough number of people, then we could actually do a workshop where we could discuss what grant writing is and how each grant requires a different kind of proposal. And to also be able to figure out whether when you are in the process of applying, is your application fit for the kind of grant, or what is it that you are looking at in a grant, and what is the grant looking at in a participant or the application. So it was just something that we thought, and maybe if there are people who are interested, then you could write to us and then we could actually do such a workshop.
That's actually a very good point, Sharmila. I'm just adding a little bit to yours, because that would save a lot of time from both sides, because the students will be more pointed towards what kind of grants they want. And at the same time, there were proposals, there are fantastic description about the process, but why that project? And so it did not make it there, but they were very strong in content in terms of content. So yeah, that's a very good idea that you both have to do a grant writing workshop.
Also wanted to say congratulations to all 3 of you, and look forward to meeting all of you, maybe on this platform. Thank you.
Kalyani. Kalyani, huh?
Can you hear me?
Very faintly.
Barely.
Now, is it better?
Slightly better.
I think Ananya Parikh in the chat box said that she would like to share something. So maybe she could unmute herself and go ahead.
Yes.
Hi everyone. First of all, congratulations to, and we were eagerly waiting for this sort of meet to start again. So thank you, Miyagi, for starting them again. Actually, I myself am a design educator, and for me, the initial discussion was very enriching, and it was a wonderful conversation to have. What I actually wanted to share with everyone was regarding that conversation that we were having. It is written by a man called Vitruvius in the first century BC, and he talks about, it's a book on architecture and how to build architecture. It's called De Architectura, and it's about, he writes, he talks about how architecture should be done, and how it's one of the first books that is ever written about architecture. And the first chapter of it talks about the education of an architect. And he says that it appears that one who professes himself as an architect should be well versed in both directions. He ought, therefore, to be both naturally gifted and amenable to instruction. Neither natural ability without instruction nor instruction without natural ability can make the perfect artist. Let him be educated, skillful with the pencil, instructed in geometry, know much history, have followed the philosophers with attention, understand music, have some knowledge of medicine, know the opinions of the jurists, and be acquainted with astronomy and the theory of the heavens. This is the first chapter, and I think your discussion was immediately reminded me of this particular portion of the book. And this was I think somewhere down the line we forgot the multidisciplinary approach to education, and which was actually being talked about back in the first century BC. So I think probably we are moving towards that section again, and your grant is essentially doing that. So it's a wonderful thing to see, and I'm looking forward to seeing the culmination of these projects. Congratulations to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so this brings us to the end of this event. I would like to take a moment to thank everyone on behalf of Neekoee Foundation. We were immensely delighted to have received the many diverse artist entrees. And we encourage you all to continue with your pursuits. Thank you, jury members, Professor Chandra, and the mentors for leading an extremely exciting conversation. And finally, to our grantees, congratulations. Thank you for joining us tonight, and hope you all have a very happy evening.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
And thank you all. Thank you, Anupam, Sharmila, Pankaj, Zulekha, Amitesh, and Kalyani, and everybody who was there with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to this year. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Nina.
Pleasure. The journey begins, in fact, now. Yeah, it's been wonderful. It's wonderful. Yes. Okay. Bye. 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 Bye, everyone.